Hey everybody, it's Overkill here with another Warhammer Army focus video. So today we are talking about the vampire counts due to a flood of comments requesting that I talk about them. So of course, similar to the other episodes, we are going to talk about characteristics and geography first. So, similar to Chaos, the vampire counts have no ranged units apart from magic. Yep, that's right. They're wizards. Necromancers, vampires, are the ones that need to cast ranged spells to actually do damage. Everything else is foot slogging or flying, I suppose. But yes, it is a huge disadvantage because pretty much all of their troops are slow moving, but some of their units, as I mentioned, can fly and are a bit faster, such as things like dire wolves, and Vargeist and such, the things that can actually fly or run. Pretty much their entire army is fodder. There are small amounts of elite troops such as Graveguard and the like, but we'll get into that as we get through the list. And they have a load of monsters and crazy big creatures and such. Their troops are unbreakable, or at least the units that are undead, which is pretty much the entire thing. So that is a huge advantage over the rest of the races. They do not run away. I'm not sure how they're going to implement it in Total War Warhammer. I don't know if it's going to be as simple as that. It would be very overpowered depending on how good their units are actually going to be. We don't know. I don't know. No one really knows the information for that yet. They're one of the only races who aren't specifically religious, although they do follow the teachings of Nagash, which is the creator. And he created the vampires thousands of years ago in the lands where the Tomb Kings occupy, which is a faction we haven't seen in Total Warhammer yet, because they're probably going to be in like the second or third game. But he created the vampires. We're not going to go into detail about this, but he created the vampires. Eventually they were outcast essentially from Nahakara. Oh, sorry, can't pronounce very well. And they ended up in the Empire. They ended up taking over Sylvania, and from then on, it's been the way it is now. Amazing. So the geography of Sylvania is not great. It is not a very nice place. It is a former imperial province of the Empire, of course, or imperial province of the Empire. What was that? Most of its territory has been absorbed by the county of Stirland, which is another province, of course. And it's just a bit of a crazy place that no sensible imperial citizen would really want to go to. Technologically, the land is far behind the rest of the empire. Proper infrastructure and even education are nearly non-existent. Most of the common folk of Sylvania are very superstitious and don't even think that gunpowder, or rather they think gunpowder is a frightening technological marvel. The middle class of Sylvania is basically non-existent, where it's basically the lowest of the low in terms of peasants, and then the highest of the high in nobility, which is the vampire counts. And this actually outshines or shadows over even the likes of Bretonia. And now Bretonia, if you're a peasant, your life is shit. So imagine being in Sylvania and being a human. Not fun. But of course, this land, Sylvania, is now considered the rightful domain of the von Karsteins, which are the current vampire counts. So the lands of Sylvania are surrounded in mist and darkness, literally everywhere. Like, think about the stereotypical vampire movie where it's like, oh, the scary castles and bats going everywhere, everything's all foggy and dark. That's Sylvania. The soil is infertile. Most of the regions are turning into bogs and swamps, marshes, that kind of stuff. And the rest just being forest. It's bogs and forests. And in the forests lay the most disgusting, grotesque creatures. Ghouls and broken vampires, essentially. It's bordered to the east by the World's Edge Mountains, which are the homeland of the dwarfs. The border between Sylvania and Stirland is basically unrecognizable. It's been redrawn many times since Sylvania has receded from the Empire. To the north, the River Styr provides a border with Ostermark, another imperial province. To the south lies some land that is currently held by Stirland. And to the southwest corner of Sylvania edges into Mootland, which is a narrow border that is steadfastly patrolled by halfling field wardens. Now, halflings are basically what you would expect from fantasy, like the halflings in Lord of the Rings. They're little short people, of course. Now, due to its proximity to the mountains, it is a land of harsh winter that paint the ground blindingly white. To go out during the winter in Sylvania is almost certain death in the night. But speaking of night in Sylvania, going out in the summer in Sylvania is not even that safe either, due to, of course, vampires and such. The storms come off the mountains all the times, and this makes for damp land, and that's why much of the land is covered in bogs and moors. So essentially, Sylvania is a place you don't want to live in. It's covered in swamps. It's covered in forest. It's a shitty place. It's always dark. It's always shitty weather. You don't want to live there. So now we move on to the politics and the hierarchy, to be more specific. For the Vampire Counts, there is no political party. You are the Vampire Count. If you are the Vampire Count, you rule the land. If you're not, you're under the Vampire Count. There's only one, and since the creation of the Vampire Counts, of the vampire race as a whole, there have only been 3, and those 3 are Vlad von Karstein, Conrad von Karstein, and now Manfred von Karstein. Of course, Sylvania is ruled by the strongest vampire. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of lords and families of vampires, and whoever is the most powerful, the most ambitious, the strongest, rules Sylvania as a vampire count. Now, of course, since the only 3 counts in history have been von Karstein, so that shows obviously that the von Karsteins are the most powerful family. They have ruled for thousands of years, and yeah, it just shows that, of course, they're the most powerful. Now, in the eyes of the other lords, Manfred is the weakest of the 3, mainly because he's not as aggressive as Vlad and Conrad, but Vlad and Conrad got themselves killed in the First and Second Vampire Wars. Now, Manfred has also been slain, but he was resurrected, and at the time of Total War Warhammer, this will be after he's been resurrected, so we're controlling him as he attempts to attack the Empire again and make an empire of undead. But yeah, it's a big problem. The lesser nobles don't respect Manfred, and since this is not a set kingdom or hierarchy or empire, none of the lords have any fealty or any loyalty to Manfred. The only thing they really do is offer troops if Manfred goes on a campaign, but other than that, they are not loyal to him at all. At a moment's notice, they could all turn on him and replace him, but no one really wants to take the job after the death of Vlad and Conrad, so they can be pissed off with Manfred all they want, but they can't replace him because nobody wants to take up the responsibility of attacking the Empire over and over again. So something interesting and unique about the Vampire Counts is the fact that they require a blood tax. Now, interestingly enough, the Vampire Counts actually keep and accept humans in Sylvania. Now, the thing about it is, every village of humans requires weekly, daily, monthly, annually sacrifices of people. Now, this could be anything. It could be the firstborn son. It could be the firstborn daughter. It could be the strongest person in the village. It could be just anybody random. It could be at the choice of the counts. It could be multiple people at once. But basically, you're allowed to live in Sylvania and offer your allegiance to the Vampire Count at the cost of course, giving away some people for your lords to feed on, essentially. And I thought that was very interesting because it means that in Warhammer, living people aren't going to, the Vampire Counts aren't just going to slay everyone. They are going to slay a lot of people, but they have to keep people around, obviously, to drink their blood. Now, of course, vampires don't need to do the blood tax. They can go out and kill people from random nearby villages in other counties. But that's really dangerous when, of course, they could just have a farm essentially of people willing to sacrifice someone just to live there and under the control of them. So we move on to the military of the vampire counts, and as I mentioned before, no ranged units, lots of fodder, low amounts of elite stuff. They're all very slow apart from some specific units, and we'll get into that. And they all have unbreakable morale, so this is going to be very interesting. Just never-ending hordes, essentially. Just picture never-ending hordes of skeletons and zombies backed up by some nice-looking, well, not nice-looking, some nice-sized beasts just ripping through the ranks and trying to get to the enemy and stuff. That's the vampire counts. But we are going to take a look at their roster. So I'm going to have an impromptu roster as if it was like the rosters for Total War Warhammer on the screen. Now, not all these units may make it into the game. Some of them are good on the tabletop, but may not be very useful in a real game of Total War. But we'll still talk about them as they are on the roster, of course. So, first of all, let's talk about infantry. So, we have zombies. Zombies, guys. They are zombies. Like, you know what a zombie is. Literally just raised up dead people, whether it be Sylvanians or anything that they fought, really. It's going to be very interesting to see what they pull off in the game in terms of looks for the zombies. I'm very excited to see if they'll have mixes of all the different races or if you can raise dead after battles and such. It's going to be very interesting. But a big point for the vampire counts is some of their troops require magic to actually stay alive. Zombies and skeleton warriors are the two biggest. They require magic to be animated, essentially. If your vampire or necromancer dies, say goodbye to your zombies and skeleton warriors, because their magic, as soon as it's lost, they are absolutely gone. But some of the other creatures don't do that, such as ghouls and such, but we'll get into them as we go down through the list. But they will just go crazy because the necromancer may not make them or keep them alive, but he controls their thinking onto the task of actually killing stuff, so they may rip apart each other or run around and scatter into different places. But anyway, moving on to the skeleton warriors, another melee infantry unit. It's skeletons. They're just normal skeletons with whatever armor and weapons they were not buried with, I suppose, but whatever armor and weapons that they managed to die with, essentially. They're raised right out of the ground. They grab their shield if they have it, their sword if they have it, or spear. That's the thing. There's going to be spear and swords because that's how they are in the tabletop game, and they are just going to go at the whim of the necromancer and kill everybody. Now, a point to make is zombie warriors are actually, or skeleton warriors are actually quite versatile in the fact that they can actually fight, whereas zombies literally walk up to people and get cut down. But they're just such big tar pits that units get bogged down by them. And of course, if many zombies get on one target, they're going to die. They're going to go down. They're going to get swarmed. But it gives room for the skeleton warriors and the other units to actually flank or just, well, pile into the fight themselves and get the actual killing blows in there, because the skeleton warriors are actually adept fighters, whereas the zombies walk into people and die and such. So for more melee infantry, we have crypt ghouls. Now, crypt ghouls are very, very, very messed up people. They are literally the most primitive you can get. They're hunched over. They're rabid. It's all because they consume flesh and rotten flesh, dead people. These are living creatures, so they're not completely controlled by the necromancer. They're not just mindless creatures. They rather would actually flank, attack from the shadows. These are going to be your shock infantry, your light shock infantry, because they have huge claws that they just run up to people and just slash them into pieces, essentially. And of course, they have poison just from the fact that they're always with dead people and just they're eating dead things. Some of them have dead things put on their back and such, like they carry torsos and stuff wrapped around them and such. You'll see from the pictures that I'm showing throughout all this. But yeah, their claws just rip into stuff and just destroy them. So next in melee infantry, we have grave guards. Now, grave guards are elite skeletons. They're bigger. They have full plate armor and, well, robes, whatever. You can tell that their armor is very old styled compared to some of the more modern looking armors and stuff with the other races. They are absolutely devastating warriors equipped with the best weapons that the vampires really have access to, or the vampire troops, that is. And their armor is heavy. They're heavily armored skeletons, essentially. Now, there's 2 units of them. They have Sword and Shield, which are just the Graveguard. But then there's Graveguard with great weapons. Now, these great weapons are actually magical. So they're just absolutely devastating. Like, you wouldn't believe. Unless you play vampire counts on the tabletop, you just won't believe how amazing these guys are. And then finally, for infantry, we have Spirit Hosts. Now, Spirit Hosts aren't really infantry, I suppose. They are people, essentially, in size and such, and using weapons and all that. But they're ghosts. They're spirits. They fly around, or not fly around. They float around going all, ooh, spooky ghosts. But they don't fight, per se. And in the tabletop, only magical weapons can hurt ghosts or ethereal units. There we go. Only magical weapons can harm them, so I'm not sure how they're going to implement in that Warhammer. But if ethereal units can only be damaged by magical weapons, OP is shit. But in all honesty, I'm not sure. I don't know anything about the vampires. We don't know anything about the vampires yet in Total Warhammer. We might be surprised. They might add in unbreakable troops and not being able to hurt ethereals without magical weapons. I'm not sure. I would like it if they stayed accurate, but at the same time, not being able to hurt ethereals without magic weapons is going to be a pain in the ass. And for people who don't know that from Warhammer, you're in for a world of hurt if you fight some ethereal units without anything magical. But anyway. So then we move on to Cavalry. So for Cavalry, there are 3 things. We have Black Knights, which are skeleton knights. And they are barded cavalry. You can see they're heavy cavalry that use lances. Now, these are going to be your first heavy or shock cavalry in the game, probably. And that's it. They literally fill in the role of cavalry because they are knights. Of course, they'll probably charge in with their lances and then draw their swords or something like that. Very powerful unit. They're a good cavalry unit, especially considering they're unbreakable and they're undead. It's just excellent. Next, we have Blood Knights. Now, these are the first vampire unit that we're actually going to take a look at. And the Blood Knights are absolutely devastating. They're considered one of the best units in the tabletop, and they are very expensive. Not in just points, but models. Holy cow, in the tabletop. I know that's not what this is about, but on the tabletop, it's like $115 for 5 of them. It's ridiculously expensive, and I hate it because I want some. But they once were an honorable part of the Imperial Army. They were a section of the Imperial Knights. But, of course, turning into vampires doesn't really bode well when you're Imperial. So now they all fight for the vampire counts. And, yeah, they are absolutely devastating. And then finally, for Vampire Cavalry, we have the Hex Wraiths. Now, Hex Wraiths are another ethereal unit. And you can see here on the board, good lord, in the picture, what they look like. Now, these guys carry giant flaming scythes, and they just fly through units, just hacking, just swinging their scythes around, killing everybody around them. And they're ethereal, so they go through units. They don't have to charge into them. They go through them, damaging as they go through, just swinging and swinging. And again, only magical weapons can hurt them. So it's going to be so interesting to see how they pull this off. Because if Hex Wraiths can't do their classical riding through units, damaging them, I can't see the point of them, really. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what CA do with them. Now, if we move into monstrous infantry / monstrous kind of things, we have, first off, the Crypt Horrors. Now, Crypt Horrors are a larger ghoul which have managed to consume the blood of a vampire. So you can imagine that probably wasn't an easy thing. So imagine a ghoul killing a vampire and drinking its blood. Maybe not killing it, but drinking its blood. But it swells the ghoul to the point of it becoming just a huge abomination and just giving it incredible strength. And you can see from the pictures, of course, these guys are crazy. But these are your heavy shock infantry. They're going to just charge right into the lines of people and bowl them over and just start swinging their tombstones or wooden clubs or whatever they manage to have, and they just destroy ranks of enemy infantry, and they are going to be tough as nails. So next up we have Vargeists, and Vargeists are what's in the soul of every vampire. And once they get just absolutely saturated with warpstone, they just turn into these disgusting, huge bat creatures. Another thing is that also turns them into Vargeists is the lack of blood. If they don't get enough blood, they start going a little bit insane, and they just turn into these big bat creatures. Now, the next up is Vargulfs, and also, by the way, Vargeists can fly, if you can tell by the wings. Now, Vargulfs are just a step up from that. These are just absolutely devolved vampires that have just let themselves go to primal urges, and they'll rip apart people. Like, imagine this thing picking up an Imperial soldier, like ripping him in half, and then just like chugging all of the blood right out of him. That's pretty much like what they'll do. But they're just incredibly strong creatures that fly around, but they've lost all personality of whatever they were. They could have been a noble, not anymore. They are just an absolute, just disgusting beast that is only alive to drink the blood of the living, essentially. So now we move on to war beasts. First we have dire wolves. These are just big corpses of giant wolves, essentially. They are your fastest unit in the army. And basically, they're just going to charge in and kill a bunch of stuff and probably die, honestly. Or you could use them to flank and kill skirmishers. That's another thing. Now, another unit are fell bats. Now, these are just units of swarming bats. They fly around and they swoop in and hurt people, suck their blood a little bit, kill some people, depending on what they do. And they're good. They'll probably be good for harassing skirmishers again. Units that can't really defend themselves that well. Stuff like that. Next up, we have Terrorgeists. And oh my god, Terrorgeists. These things are awesome. They're giant zombie bats, essentially. They look like dragons, but no, they are bats. But they're just extremely crazy. Now, you're not going to be able to have many of these. These are extremely rare. But the devastation that these are going to bring, their screeches deafen people. They are super fast. They can fly super far and fast. And the huge mouth and the claws just are going to rip through people and just monsters alike. They can probably take down anything. Now, zombie dragons, we've seen in the various little Total War Warhammer clips. They've been in the corner. They've been in the background as a tease, basically. Now, zombie dragons are, as the name suggests, they're century-old dragons, carcasses, essentially. And of course, just like any of the undead, they have no personality or thoughts of their former selves. They're literally just a shell that are used by necromancers and vampires to their bidding. Now, zombie dragons, interestingly enough, are mounts for vampire lords. So that's going to be so cool if you could put Manfred on a zombie dragon. Oh, I'm so excited. But zombie dragons are, of course, crazy. They jump in, they slash people around, bite people, all that stuff. It just offers a really big flying mount, essentially. Now, the final beast are the Abyssal Terrors. Now, these are a chaos-created creature, guys. That's interesting. The vampire counts actually take into service a chaos creature, which are just these terribly corrupted, weird-looking dragon-type creatures. They're quite a bit smaller, as you can see from the picture, than a zombie dragon. And they are just absolutely ferocious. They are just going to rip apart people and just fly around killing everything. It's going to be really interesting to see them, as I haven't had much experience with them on the tabletop. Now, the final section are war machines. First off, we have corpse carts, which are large carts of corpses. What do you know? What a very confusing name, huh? This attracts a huge influx of dark magic from the land, and these are mounts usually for necromancers, so it makes their magic so much more powerful. And I think that these will make it into the game as a mount for necromancers. It would make sense, and they're just crazy at their main thing is helping in raising more dead, because it sends waves of dark magic across the battlefield, raising the dead around them. So it's going to be very interesting again to see how they are implemented in the game. If they are at all, it would be nice if they were, but we'll just have to see. Now, an interesting one is the black coaches. Now, the black coaches are literally a coach driven by horses, It has a scythe-wielding wraith on it, which are, you know, as the thing drives by, they're going to be swinging their scythe and stuff. And it's a transport for vampires, essentially. It's very interesting. I'm not quite sure if they'll have it in the game. Literally, the vampire sits in it like a normal stagecoach, so it's going to be very interesting, as it doesn't have much offensive power. But who knows? They might implement it just to carry the vampires around. So next we have the Coven Thrones, which I don't really see getting into the game. The Coven Throne is just a big throne, essentially, on top, being carried aloft by a bunch of spirits. And it doesn't offer really anything to the Vampire Lord in terms of magic. It doesn't offer anything in terms of real offensive power. Sure, the spirits and the vampires get to attack from it. But honestly, I think you're better off just putting them on a dragon or putting them on foot. So I'm not really sure if they'll add in the Coven Throne, because it doesn't add anything. It's literally just something for them to ride on. It looks cool, and I have one as a model personally, but I just don't see the point of it. But finally in the War Machines is the Mortis engine. Now this is very important, as this thing is crazy important in Vampire Count's armies. They are huge reliquaries that are carried again by spirits. It's the same model, essentially, only painted differently, and with a necromancer on it rather than a vampire. But it's just it makes every vampire or every undead unit around it just so much more powerful and just able to kill so much. It's crazy, and it scares the other units. It bolsters yours, it makes yours more powerful, and it frightens other units. But there is a bit of a risk. In the tabletop, this thing can explode, and if they implement that to Total War Warhammer, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see the devastation that an explosion from a Mortis engine would do. So then, to finish off the roster, we have a few characters. We have Vampire Lords, which are, as you can imagine, powerful vampires. We have Master Necromancers. Again, cool. They're just a powerful necromancer. Then we have Strigoi Ghoul Kings. Now, Strigoi Ghoul Kings are actually vampires, but they've been banished basically to the woods, and they're actually being hunted down. They were once a noble vampire bloodline, but they're being hunted down by the other vampires and killed off. So they've been sent to the woods and the caves and such, and they've just devolved into these disgusting monsters that become Ghoul Kings, and they lead large armies of ghouls, although not actually being ghouls themselves. And then we have Vampires and Necromancers. They're just a step down. They're just a hero version of the Lords and Master Necromancers. We have White Kings, which are ancient human warlords that have been risen up by vampires and necromancers to lead hordes of skeletons, essentially. They are a skeleton themselves. They're pretty comparable to a Graveguard in looks, and basically they're just a very cheap way of leading a Vampire Count's army. You still do need a Necromancer, though, of course, if you're going to bring one of these. And then finally, there's Tomb Banshees. Now, Tomb Banshees are sorceress, witches, enchantress, anybody that have died in a bad way, essentially. They've been risen up, and these women become evil Tomb Banshees. They're just always screaming. They hate everybody, and they just kill everyone because they're so mad that they didn't receive a proper death or a proper burial. And basically, they're just absolute monsters. And again, they're ethereal, so magic weapons are the only things that can hurt them. So that's the roster out of the way. We then move on to characters. Now, the characters for the Vampire Counts, and by the way, this video's been the longest so far. Hopefully you guys are enjoying, and thank you for watching. But anyway, it's one of the smallest, if not the smallest, roster of characters in Warhammer. But at the same time saying that, they are some of the most powerful, if not the most powerful. The Vampire Lord is the best unnamed character, if not second to a Chaos Lord. I think vampires are the best, depending on the equipment you bring. Now, 4 out of the 6 named characters for the Vampire Counts are Von Karstens, that being Vlad, Manfred, Conrad, and Isabella. The other 2 being Krell, the Lord of Undeath, which is a Chaos Lord, which was turned into a a skeleton, which is awesome, and then Heinrich Kemmler, which is the greatest necromancer that has ever lived. But anyway, the only confirmed, actually he's not even confirmed, but we all know who it is. The confirmed legendary lord for the vampire counts is Manfred von Karstein. Now Manfred has been ruling for a long time, and he's been the most successful vampire lord because, of course, his father, Vlad, and his brother, Conrad, have been killed. Father being a loose term. The vampire counts don't actually give birth or anything. They pick someone to be their next of kin, essentially, next of kin, whatever, and they give them the blood kiss, which is just biting them and turning them into a vampire. You know, the classic bite, turn into a vampire bullshit. But, yeah. He's Vlad's son and Conrad's brother, as Conrad was another son of Vlad, and Isabella is their mother. You catch my drift. But Manfred is our confirmed legendary lord, and he is very powerful. He is an amazing. He's the strongest living vampiric necromancer. The most powerful necromancer is Heinrich Kemmler, as I mentioned earlier. But he is so powerful that he is able to pretty much create huge armies by himself and lead them into battle without any real problems. Now, of course, Manfred has died, as I mentioned earlier in the video before, but he was resurrected by some unknown necromancer, I believe. So, whatever. So, yeah, Manfred's our only confirmed legendary lord, and I can only really think of one other legendary lord for the vampire counts, and that is Heinrich Kemmler. Because Vlad's dead, Conrad's dead, Isabella's dead, and Krell isn't really that important. He is important, but he's not legendary lord important. He might be a character. I'm not quite sure what they're going to do. They might have characters that don't count as legendary lords, because there's a huge amount of characters in Warhammer that don't really deserve to be legendary lords, I suppose. Krell isn't going to lead a vampire army by himself. Heinrich could. Heinrich has. Manfred can, because he's the vampire count. So it's going to be interesting to see, because I'm just gonna call it now that Krell isn't going to be one, and if they do make another vampire count legendary lord, it's going to be Heinrich. So yeah. Anyway, guys, this video has dragged on long enough, much longer than the other ones. I do apologize for that, but hopefully you enjoyed. This has been the Vampire Counts faction focus for Total War Warhammer, and I have been Overkill as always. Thank you for watching, and next episode will be the Dwarfs. See you then.